Morning, everybody. Welcome to Chassidus in the morning. Basi, LeGani, 15 minutes to change your life. Achana for Yud Shevat. Okay, so we're in the beginning of chapter 3. We're talking about folly, or what we used the word, I think it was stupidity, foolishness. And we're discussing that that in the term shtus, shittim, which is the wood that was used to build the Mishkan, shittim. So it can either be, and the term in Torah, when you use this word shittim, is turning. In general, you have like kisista ishtoi, when a woman turns astray. You have when the Yidden were in shittim, and they sinned. So we see that shittim, which was the wood that was used to build the Mishkan, has a connotation of turning. Now, there's two types of turning. There's turning in the positive, turning above. The turning they're talking about is turning above or below intellect. There's turning in the positive sense, above intellect, and turning below intellect, doing something that doesn't make any sense. We just do it because that's why we do it. And we're discussing this because ultimately we're saying the whole purpose is to do with Achtenim, take a dwelling place for God down here, and it's through Iskaf and Ishapcha, through working on ourselves and making sure to make the right decisions. So part of the challenge, and we're comparing everything sort of in contrast to the Mishkan. Just like in the Mishkan, there was the animal sacrifice. So we have to bring up our animal, our Nefesh Bahamis, to get it consumed by the fire, the Nefesh Lakis, talk to it in a way that it can understand. Like the example I used about convincing it to come learn Chassidus, but it's going to get a Danish, and it could be anything you want. If there's something you want to do good, you want to go to bed on time, but you're struggling, and you recognize that struggle really comes from Nefesh Bahamis. So we have to figure out what's something I can teach my Nefesh Bahamis to appreciate. It can start off in the language Nefesh Bahamis understands, like Danish or whatever it is. But ultimately, you can push it to more refined things that we're going to have a better day tomorrow if we go to bed now. And sort of talk to it in a way to understand. And then continuing on this topic of trying to transform this world and do all these things is in the Mishkan we have these shittim. So we're now discussing how to do things above intellect, below intellect, foolishness. That was the word. Yeah, foolishness. So we discussed yesterday the ultimate question, sort of what happens, why do we do it? Why do we sin? If we're here, we have a mission. God gave us this mission to do mitzvahs. Okay, good. So why do we sin? It's against like everything. It's like going against the rules. You're playing a game, you're cheating. Why would you do that? And why is it so difficult? It's not like it's easy to not cheat. It's like impossible. It's very difficult. Why? So he says basically because we don't feed the Nefesh Lakis enough, and we're feeding Nefesh Bahamis a lot. What ends up happening is that we're not sensitive to it. Whereas when it comes to a type of something that's very clear to us, this is going against Judaism, so then we don't even have it's clear for us. But when it comes to, so to speak, a minor avera in our heads, it's minor, so it doesn't really matter. Nothing really changes. It's all good. We're all still good Jewish people, so it doesn't matter. So it doesn't make a difference to us. So then we go do it. But why don't we sense that? Because of lack of sensitivity. Because we're not listening, talking to our Nefesh Lakis enough, and recognizing Nefesh Lakis, Nefesh Bahamis. Yeah, we'll go from the top of 15. This spirit of folly deadens one's sensitivity. The power of one's physical drives and the burning urgency of the animal soul's desire cools one's adar and numbs one's sensitivity for spiritual things. A person can become so bound up and excited by his passions and material desires that his awareness of spiritual feelings becomes utterly hidden to the point of total insensitivity. He no longer feels the pleasant sweetness, the goodly value of fulfilling the mitzvahs. Likewise, he no longer senses the lowliness of his distance from God, which has been brought on by his misdeeds. And the underlying cause of this entire process is the animal soul, which covers up and obscures the light of the godly soul. So the problem is that you've been feeding an animal soul so much so then you lose the total sensitivity. I had a friend, I said this maybe in a different share, that one, like he left Crown Heights, and he called me up and he said, "Did you just kiss leave tonight?" And I'm tired. I'm tired. I don't care. I don't want to go anywhere. Like, there's a rain going on. I don't really care for it. I want to go home, have a steak and a beer, and watch a TV show or something. He said something like that. But it was bothering him. So that's already a good step. It's bothering him. Then we talked a little bit, and then it came Gimel Talmud's time, and he called me and he said, "I don't feel anything." And like, you could tell, like he's like, "I don't want to feel anything, but it's bothering me that I don't feel anything." So I told him then, I said, "Listen, you have to appreciate that if you're constantly feeding Nefesh Bahamas, you're not feeding Nefesh Lakis, that's what's going to happen. You're going to lose that sensitivity." And this is sort of the story. Well, if you come and we feel like we're like, "I'm not so connected," or "I don't feel like Yitzhak's coming, I don't feel anything," you don't have to feel bad. You just have to recognize that it's like, what's the result? Why did this happen? It's because if I'm not going to feed my Nefesh Lakis, I'm not going to feed my soul, I'm not going to daven, I'm not going to learn, I'm not going to try to connect to God at all, then what's going to happen is you can't run and feed your Nefesh Bahamas, and somehow you'll still be spiritually sensitive. And if you realize that you're not, that the key is what we're saying here is to feed your Nefesh Lakis and try to convince your Nefesh Bahamas to do godly things. And it can be convincing in getting rewards, prizes, whatever Nefesh Bahamas enjoys. It could be if I daven in the morning, I'm gonna treat myself to something, whatever that thing is. That can be kosher. It can be on the way to work. I'm gonna buy myself a treat if I daven in the morning. And that Nefesh Bahamas suddenly wants to daven in the morning. And it's the same. And it's the same thing. And this is essentially what we're saying, that when you don't do those things, you don't feed Nefesh Lakis, and your Nefesh Bahamas is totally getting fed, meaning you wake up in the morning and you're eating. Everyone has a Nefesh Bahamas thing. It's like Rebbe says, a 7-layer cake. You're indulging in the 7-layer cake, so then you're going to lose the sensitivity to Torah mitzvahs. Now, the fundamental nature of the godly soul is godliness. This is especially true of the unique spark of God that is related to the body of any particular individual. By means of this spark, the soul appreciates all godly things and is keenly aware of anything that opposes godliness. So now that you have Nefesh Lakis, that he's sensitive, and he appreciates godliness and everything connected with godliness, and everything that's against godliness, he's sensitive to. He wants no part or anything in which godliness is not manifest. Whatever doesn't have a likus, whatever is not godly, he doesn't want any part of it. When faced with something that actually opposes godliness, he flees as if from danger or death. And anything that doesn't have godliness or is against godliness, he runs away. That's our Nefesh Lakis within us. We have this. He flees as if from danger of death. Indeed, it is clear to the godly soul that spiritual death is much worse than physical death. Spiritual death, the neshama losing its connection, is much worse than being alive without any connection to your neshama. It's better, not better, but for the neshama, being connected to God is more important than life. Physical life. But what's physical life already without the neshama, without Torah mitzvah, without connection to God? It is only its own desires to connect with godliness and to make a vessel for godliness. That's the whole desire of Nefesh Lakis. He's sensitive, wants to connect, and doesn't want anything else but that. You're going to say to yourself, "But I have a Nefesh Lakis," but we all do, but I don't see that sensitivity that I have. That's just because it's covered over in Nefesh Bahamas. And that's what he's going to explain. However, the gross materiality, the self-assertiveness of the animal soul muzzles the spiritual taste of the godly soul. So we all have the ability to be that sensitive to elikus and to godly things. But what stops us is the Nefesh Bahamas. This is self-evident. Pleasure-seeking worldly enjoyment obscures one's sensitivity to godliness. Indeed, in the holy tongue, the very word for the world, Eilam, is related to the same word as obscurity, Helam. I mean, even though you have that potential, it's being covered over by the Nefesh Bahamas, and it matters how much you cover it. As my father used to tell me, you can't, and it's from Chassidus, you can't kach in godly pleasures and in spiritual pleasures. It's like a person wanting to be an Olympic athlete and eating junk food and sleeping in and not doing any training. You can't not do training and expect to be an Olympic athlete. So too, we want to be connected to godliness. We can't sit there and eat 7-layer cake all day and expect to be connected to godliness. You have to feed your nefesh l'kis and feed that sensitivity that you have. This situation is very opposite of the ultimate purpose for which the universe was created. Meaning the helem of the world is the opposite of how the purpose of the world is creation. For God desired to have a dwelling place in this lowly world. How? By means of man's labor refining his body and animal cells. So our job to make this dir b'tachtonim, to make God present here, is being sensitive to ourselves, to our nefesh l'kis, and learning how to talk to nefesh b'hamis in a way that he can understand, to be more sensitive, to help us be more sensitive to l'kus, which will ultimately help us be more sensitive to l'kus. By means of man's labor of refining his body and animal soul, his physical nature, man was placed in this world in order to sift it and refine it. Instead, chas v'shalom, if we're not listening to nefesh l'kis and listening to nefesh b'hamis, and we're doing eating the 7-layer cake constantly, or whatever our 7-layer cake is, like we talked about in a few days before, everyone, remember, when we say this word nefesh b'hamis, everyone should have an example for them. Whether it's going to bed late, or waking up late, or not davening in the morning, or not saying brachos, or something that they know they should be doing, they want to be doing, they're not doing. The world covers up the light of truth within him to the point where he becomes so coarse and so materially oriented that he loses every trace of spiritual perceptiveness. And that's how bad it can get. You lose all that sensitivity. This contrary course of behavior is brought about when a person is dominated by his animal soul, which is firmly fixed and rooted in worldly desires. So how does it happen? The whole purpose is that nefesh l'kis will come down into this physical world and work in nefesh b'hamis and get it along and teach it how to have enjoyment of l'kus and make a dir b'tachtonim, make God's presence felt here. But what's happening? It's not happening that way, but it's been so covered over the nefesh l'kis and nefesh b'hamis, because that is the nature and its goal. That is what such a person ponders on. That is what such a person ponders on and thinks about and talks about with zest. Exercise of these feelings, and in particular enjoyment of worldly things. So if you think about all these worldly things, you think about the enjoyments of life, the physical enjoyments, and you just talk about it and you kachna all the time, that negates the divine soul's sensitivity to godliness. So your nefesh l'kis loses that sensitivity and that ability to be sensitive to l'kus. This happens mainly because the animal soul is intrinsically frigid with respect to spiritual matters. By nature, the animal soul has no connection to l'kus. It's non-tangible for it. But you can teach it. It's difficult a little bit. It's not used to it. It's easy. It understands food and pleasure, physical pleasure. Spiritual pleasure doesn't understand. Like I told you the story when I started learning. When I started learning that Sunday night, after wasting my day, it felt good, but in a very different way. Not like eating ice cream feel good. It was a sensitive feeling good, but it felt really deep. This is how the animal soul is constituted. Its very name, animal soul, describes it. All its vigor and all its feelings are directed only towards things that are animal nature. Animal soul wants animalistic things. This is what we in fact observe in people who are dominated by the animal's nature. Not only are they devoid of the chair's wisdom and upright character, but they moreover act like animals, trampling and scorning spiritual matters of which they have no conception, like an animal that lacks the sensitivity or the discernment to know whether he's trampling on the ground, on a plant, or on men. Just like an animal that's like very rough, just steps, doesn't even pay attention when it's stepping. Could be stepping on a person, could be stepping on plants, rocks, doesn't matter. It just doesn't even think. So too there are people. These people scoff at Torah and mitzvahs. Some of these people choose their own path. One mitzvah they do decide to observe, and another mitzvah they run, and so on. And you can see, so to speak, I think about this within ourselves. They're like, some mitzvahs like not so important for us. I'm like, oh, whatever. But that means our animal soul is taking charge. But if it didn't, if our nefesh l'kis was in charge, every mitzvah would be important, and would feel that same feeling like we talk about when it came up to giving our lives, would give up no questions asked. That would be with every mitzvah. It's like I was reading a story to Leivik before into bed about the Rebbe Leivik, the Rebbe's father, that when communism took over, basically they had a lot of wheat fields. That's how, and he had mashkichim for Pesach to check the flour, make sure that to make the matzah for Pesach, and he made sure that it was matzah shmur, there was no water. And so basically they took over the communists, and they said they needed hashgacha. They said to him, "You need to give it hashgacha." So he said, "Yep, totally fine. I just need to make sure my mashkachim are there to check it." And they said, "What do you mean you need to check it?" So he said, "I have to make sure there's no water, anything or chametz, anything, it gets mixed in." And said, well, what happens if it gets mixed in? And he said, then I'm not giving my hashgacha. He said, no, you're giving hashgacha. And he said, listen, God's in charge. I listen to God. That's my king. That's my boss. You're not my boss. I'm not going to do anything you tell me to do if it's against Torah and mitzvahs. What happens? Because he's so in tune with Nefesh Elikis, he can't do anything else. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And it's a process. It doesn't not all or nothing. It's more sensitive and more sensitive and more sensitive, slowly. This behavior results from the brazenness and cold and sensitivity of the animal soul and the spirit of folly that it induces. And this is all coming from the Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, and also the folly, the foolishness that we do things that doesn't make any sense. Because now that we've explained all this, it all makes sense. Do Torah mitzvahs and connect to the Goli soul. You don't become insensitive, become sensitive. They can cover the light of truth to the degree where a person will sin, thus achieving the very opposite of the divine plan of creation. And so then what happens? So it causes us that we're able to sin. Like we went back in the beginning of the question, beginning of Gimel, how is it possible a person can sin? So we said this. It's because we lose sensitivity to our Nefesh Elikis. The Nefesh Elikis doesn't have the ability to speak and to give his opinion anymore. The animal soul is take full charge, and he wants pleasure. He doesn't think about sins or mitzvahs. He thinks about pleasure. Talk to me about pleasure. And he's always looking at pleasure. And so therefore you lose a sensitivity. So when it comes to an Avera, you're not thinking about whether it's an Avera. You're not thinking about how does it feel for me? Is it good? Do I enjoy this? Which is against the whole divine plan for creation. For God desired that the world be created in order that it be refined. And our job is to be in this world, and now that we're in this situation, try to work on it and try to be more sensitive to ourselves and more sensitive to our Nefesh Elikis and recognize, what am I doing? Am I doing this from pleasure-seeking purposes or for the benefit of my soul, for the benefit of my connection with God, and for the purpose of why I was created? Instead, the animal soul affects the exact opposite. The world is not only left unrefined and unpurified, but it serves moreover to cover the light of truth. That's the spirit of folly of the animal soul causes the truth to be hidden. Yeah. So it covers over, and then the truth becomes hidden. And like we explained in Tanya these last few days, and connected with this, but when it comes to something clear that we feel, that we recognize that we're going to lose our connection to God, we have no questions about it, and we totally give ourselves up. But here I would just cover it over, so we don't feel that loss of connection, because we don't have that sensitivity of the connection. Summary. The chapter explains how the spirit of folly and one's powerful desires and the animal soul in its entirety obscure the truth, thus dulling one's sensitivity to godliness, one's appreciation of the value of mitzvahs, one's awareness of the lowliness of being separated from God. You see, the Nefesh Bahamis takes over. Really, it's coming from the spirit of folly, and one's powerful desires obscures the truth, dulls your sensitivity to godliness, you lose appreciation for mitzvahs, and you don't appreciate the lowliness of being separated from God. Tomorrow we'll start chapter 4. 2 more chapters to go. Chapter 4 is short, so Mr. Hashem will finish it tomorrow. Everyone, thank you for joining and have a great day.